Howdy. This video is about loosening up and tightening up, which comes from Dr. Linton's phases of fatherhood development. However, by diving deeper into this phase, into this aspect of the challenge or growing edge of fatherhood, we start to see some of the complexity that lies within each of us. This opens up a sense of two-sidedness, that instead of being just one way, we're more multifaceted, maybe having an ability to shift or alternate between the tight and the loose depending upon what's required in that situation. In other words, it's not about always being tight or always being loose, but knowing when and how we use which part of ourselves. Fatherhood doesn't require just us being one way. Instead, we really need that flexibility. And many aspects of fatherhood call us to live in that tension in between the tight and the loose, between structure and flexibility, control and spontaneity, and there's us right in the middle, bridging the two worlds. And while this balance may sound kind of exciting, before we get into thinking about what that might look like, we have to start by thinking about where we are at today. In what ways are we one-sided? What is that one-sidedness? And what is this other that we're trying to invite more into our lives in order to have two-sidedness? And so I encourage you to think about, where are you starting today? Which of the tightness, looseness dichotomy seems to describe where you are? So to start, we're going to think about the dad who might feel tight prior to becoming a father, and now is looking to invite some of the looseness. That some fathers come to parenting with a pretty tight structure that pre-exists, this precise wake-up time, bedtime, meal preps, workout schedules. In that way, their life is kind of built around predictability and structure and productivity. And so these folks might say, I don't feel like eating now, but it's my meal time, and so I'm going to eat. There's a sense of continuing to move forward, even if our bodies say we want to do something different, right? There was a plan, we're going to follow through with that. And maybe we can start to hear how that structure has a lot of value, how it can start to help people kind of gain a sense of mastery or control over their life, to be able to develop skills and experiences and knowledge in a thoughtful and consistent way in order to develop new competencies. I think we can also see how this could become rigidity, particularly when we add a child into the mix. All of a sudden, a father is pulled and stretched a little thin. And so how do we deal with that maybe sense of being overwhelmed if our plans change? We've got a schedule and now it's altered. What do we do with that? Or fitting everything in with such a concise, methodical schedule with so many things there, all of a sudden we're adding a child to that. How do we integrate their needs too and still meet what we need? Because becoming fathers disrupts a lot of that precision. We might be scheduling our lives down to the 15-minute mark because we have so much that we want to fit in. Now we add a child. How do we deal with that? Because there are some things that a child will do on schedule and certain ages where children will get hip to a particular schedule, and an infant, a toddler, even a child, a teenager, they don't necessarily live on schedules all the time, and they particularly don't live on our schedule. So there can be a lot of discomfort when that tightness in ourselves comes in contact with some of the messy looseness of childhood. And so it calls on us to loosen up a little bit. And what this means for us, particularly if we're pre-existent tight fathers, is letting go of some of that perfection, saying it needs to be just a particular way, letting go of some of that control, saying there are going to be times when things shift and change. We might need to cognitively make allowances for the unpredictable, for being able to respond with flexibility, to say, okay, at this time I'm going to let go of this schedule, I'm going to bracket it up here, I'm going to be present for what's happening now, to be able to respond in the moment. And to push us a little bit more into this looseness, we might experiment with our child, scheduling unscheduled time, essentially time just to be together, to be in a space together, to explore together, to flex together, and just allow that. And it might be a way that we start to allow our tightness to open up to that looseness. Now on the other side, we have fathers who start from a pre-existent loose space, and as a result need to invite in a little bit of the tightness. So they're kind of loose with their structure, and they're exploring maybe how to tighten up. In this situation, we might not really have a set routine. Maybe the job time is our only time that we have a particular point during the day where we need to do something. But otherwise, maybe we don't do a lot of planning. We just kind of allow our emotions, our impulses, kind of what we feel like in the moment to decide our behaviors. In contrast to the tight person, maybe we just don't have a wake-up time. We wake up when we're ready for it, and we roll into the day maybe just in time for our job. And instead of having a particular lunchtime, we just eat when we're hungry. Maybe we forget about meals, or we forget about those daily basic tasks. We can just let things emerge when they emerge. To the tight person, this lifestyle might feel chaotic, even disconnected. But when we're really embracing this, we might feel free and just present with what is. We can see from this, though, that it can be hard to manage adult responsibilities with this looseness. And when we add a child to that mix, it becomes all the harder because there are a lot of responsibilities. Because our child has needs that now are competing for our time, we need to make sure that fatherhood brings some intentionality. We need to be intentional about the choices that we're making and when we're doing things. And while children don't always live on a schedule or routine, they nevertheless thrive on consistency and rhythm that we help create in their lives. And so for loose fathers, we need to start thinking about how do we bring in some of this tightness, because we need to create this different type of environment for our children. And so we might explore creating anchors as we tighten up. What are the set feeding times that we need to hit? What are the bath days or bath times? And what are those basic sleep routines that our child needs? So as fathers, we might still be personally living in more of a loose manner. We make sure that our children bring some of that structure, some of that tightness into our lives, that we're able to meet those needs. So too, we can start planning, but planning around our values. So not just when we feel like it, but thinking about what do we want to show up for, and what ways do we want to show up for that, and making sure that those then are present in our schedule. And unfortunately, we have to follow through with this. Even when it's not convenient, when it's not fun, we need to show up, and show up when we say we're going to show up. And this balance between the two is not easy, because we do start with a one-sidedness. We might start as tight and need to come in contact with the looseness. We might start as loose and need to come in contact with that tightness. And Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this metaphor of a river, that on one side we have chaos, and the other side we have rigidity. And if we steer too far towards one side, we have this imbalance. If we're too close to chaos, things feel out of control, overwhelming, and we're dysregulated. If we steer too close to rigidity, everything's uptight, needs to be in a box, and there's no looseness, freeness, or living. And so again, that goal is to stay in that center area, wiggling a little bit of back and forth so that we've got a little bit of structure and a little bit of spontaneity. It's not about a perfect balance all the time, but instead slight course corrections as we move along through this river. Now, with that, I think we can all get a sense of how the ways in which we structure our day, the way in which we think about and approach activities can be both loose and tight, and how we might be able to grow that other side of ourselves, either loosening up a little bit or tightening up a little bit. And I want to talk about substance use in the context of tight and loose, because alcohol and cannabis use can create some of that tension between these two polarities. It's not uncommon for people in our society to use these substances. So I want to make sure that we're not shaming this. It's okay. Things like alcohol and cannabis are oftentimes used in order to help us loosen up. But unfortunately, sometimes it can loosen us up a little bit too much. And if that looseness starts to turn into chaos, we can then become a source of terror to our children, a danger to them. In those contexts where we become a threat, we need to make sure that we discontinue all use. This can be tough for fathers to think about, to reflect upon how is our use of things like alcohol and cannabis impacting our children, to reflect on how intentional am I with my use? Do I choose those times that are safe for me to imbibe something? Also to reflect on in what ways is substance use getting me to escape from the situation, that maybe we feel like things are too tight. And so we want to invite more of this looseness in. We want to let go. That can oftentimes open us up to a new awareness about how we want to invite looseness in a sober way. And so thinking about how we might tighten up a little bit, reflecting on staying in a safe zone with use to make sure that we don't become impaired to the point of being a terror or being non-functional. For example, if We've had too many drinks to know whether or not we should call the hospital because our child seems ill, then we've had too many drinks. And furthermore, we should never be intoxicated when we are actively providing care to our children. We should not be high changing diapers. We should not be high driving our child to soccer practice. We also want to make sure that we're tightening up where we store or keep these substances. We want to keep them secure and out of reach, particularly with the edible cannabis products that can look like and taste like candy. Out of reach is common for a lot of parents, but thinking secure. Are they locked up? Are they in child-proof containers? Be honest with ourselves. Examine our use. Talk with our partners about this. Or if we're uncertain, talk to a professional about this. Because we want to make sure that we are safe with our family and that we are not a source of discomfort or threat. And as we start to wrap up, we're going to zoom back out to think about that loosening up and tightening up as not being a one-time fix, but as an ongoing dance of sorts between the two sides. Being aware of what our default is to begin with, our growing edge, starts to identify then what opportunities we need to develop or grow within ourselves. And over time, we're going to develop more of that flexibility to move seamlessly and adaptively between the tightness and the looseness so that we can show up for ourselves and our children in a way that's growthful, helpful, and supportive. Thanks so much.